The Badge of Truth, A Clash Between Prejudice and Justice, Chapter 1. The traffic stopped. The sun dipped low over the skyline of Sacramento, painting the sky in soft hues of lavender and gold. The city's hum quieted as commuters made their way home, headlights flickering on like fireflies that a black sedan cruised steadily down the boulevard. Inside sat Evelyn Carter, a composed and striking black woman in her early 40s, dressed in a tailored gray suit. Her polished black heels tapped rhythmically against the floor mat as soft jazz floated through the speakers. Her mind was still tangled in the threads of a meeting she had just wrapped up: policy discussions, budgets, staffing. Her life was a constant juggle between high-stakes decisions and personal composure. Her phone buzzed on the console, flashing a text, "Home soon?" from her daughter. Evelyn smiled softly before the sharp wail of a siren cut through the calm. Red and blue lights flared in her rearview mirror. Evelyn's heart sank. She glanced at her speedometer, within the limit. She'd stopped at every red light. Why am I being pulled over? She slowed to the curb, signaling properly, and took a deep breath. The patrol car screeched to a halt behind her. A moment later, Officer Mark Benson emerged. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a hardened jawline. His boots struck the pavement with purpose. His hand hovered close to his holster as he approached. Evelyn lowered her window halfway, her hands resting calmly on the steering wheel. "License and registration," he barked, not offering the usual greeting. "Good evening, officer. May I ask why I'm being pulled over?" His jaw tightened. "License, registration." Evelyn exhaled slowly, reaching into her glove box without sudden movements and handing him the documents. He snatched them from her hand, his eyes darting between the paperwork and her face. "You ran a yellow light." Her brows lifted. "I stopped when it turned red." Mark scoffed. "You pushed it. Could have been reckless." Evelyn held back a retort. "I'm sorry if that's how it seemed, officer." His eyes lingered on her, studying her suit, her expensive car. Then, almost casually, "You from around here?" "My address is on my license." "Doesn't always mean you belong." Evelyn's hands tightened around the wheel. The subtext was deafening. This wasn't about a traffic violation. It was about her. "Where do you work?" he pressed. "I don't see how that's relevant." Mark leaned into the window, his presence imposing. "I like knowing who I'm dealing with. Can never be too careful." Evelyn didn't flinch. "I'm heading home, officer. I'd like to keep it that way." Mark's smirk faded, replaced by cold authority. "Step out of the car." Evelyn's pulse quickened. "On what grounds?" "Failure to comply can escalate things fast," he warned. Her mind raced. She knew this game. Escalation through intimidation. Still, she complied, stepping out in her polished heels, her posture unbent. Mark towered over her, clearly unsettled by her poise, hands on the hood. He ordered. She did, feeling the rough metal beneath her palms. Mark patted her down, not rough, but not respectful either. She felt his frustration growing when he found nothing. "You're clean," he muttered, clearly disappointed. Evelyn turned, locking eyes with him. Was that the plan all along? To find something to justify this stop? Mark's jaw twitched. "I don't need to justify anything." She reached into her pocket slowly, pulling out a slim leather badge holder. "Evelyn Carter," she said, flipping it open. "Chief of Internal Affairs for the Sacramento Police Department." The blood drained from his face. "Wah. I oversee misconduct investigations," she added coolly. "Like this one." His hand dropped from his belt. I didn't know." "That's the problem," Evelyn snapped. "You don't know who you're targeting, but you still act on prejudice." For the first time, Mark seemed truly cornered. ####Chapter 2. The fallout. The next morning, Evelyn sat in her glass-walled office. The city skyline sprawled behind her. A stack of files sat on her desk, but her focus was elsewhere. Officer Mark Benson's name glowed on her screen. His personnel file opened. A troubling pattern emerged. Complaints of unnecessary stops, use of force, racial profiling. None ever escalated to disciplinary action. A knock pulled her attention. Chief Raymond Walker stepped in, gray-haired, imposing, but fair. I heard about last night. She gestured to the file. This wasn't his first offense. Still, he hesitated. You sure you want to go public with this? Evelyn leveled him with a look. Raymond, if I let this slide, I'm part of the problem. He nodded, reluctantly. Do what you need to do. #### Chapter 3. The investigation. A week later, an internal hearing was convened. Officer Benson sat stiffly in a chair across from Evelyn, his badge glinting under the harsh fluorescent lights. A panel of senior officers flanked Evelyn, the tension thick enough to choke on. She began, her voice measured. We're here today to review Officer Benson's conduct. This isn't just about one traffic stop, it's about a pattern of behavior. Mark's knuckles whitened on the table. The lead investigator detailed the numerous complaints against him. Ignored, buried, forgotten. Mark finally spoke. I didn't intend to harm anyone. Evelyn's gaze was ice. Intent isn't the issue. It's impact. You wield power, Officer Benson, and you abused it. He swallowed hard, seeing the career he'd built slipping away. The panel agreed. Suspension without pay, mandatory retraining, and a probationary period. Evelyn knew some wanted a harsher punishment, but systemic change had to start somewhere. Chapter 4. Reform. The fallout was immediate. News leaked. Some community leaders called Evelyn a hero for holding officers accountable. Others accused her of weakening the force. Even within the department, tensions flared. You're dividing us. One officer sneered in a meeting. Evelyn didn't waver. Accountability isn't division, it's integrity. She pushed for reforms, mandatory bias training, anonymous complaint systems, community oversight panels. It wasn't easy. Lieutenant Harris, a longtime officer, cornered her in the break room. This won't fix everything. No, Evelyn agreed. But it's a start. Chapter 5. The bigger picture. Months later, at a community forum, Evelyn faced a packed auditorium, citizens, police officers, activists. She stood at the podium, her badge gleaming under the stage lights. This isn't about one bad cop, she began. It's about a system that lets bias hide behind a badge. Applause erupted. She continued, we have to do better. And that starts with accountability, transparency, and respect for the community and for the badge. A young black woman in the front row stood, her voice trembling. How do we trust you'll follow through? Evelyn didn't hesitate. Because I'm not asking for trust, I'm working to earn it. The room fell into heavy, thoughtful silence before applause swelled again. Epilogue. A new standard. Officer Benson completed his retraining, but the department had changed. Evelyn had established stricter oversight and community input. There were more eyes on every stop, every interaction. Some officers left. New ones were hired under more rigorous standards. The IT wasn't perfect, but it was progress. And for Evelyn, that was enough for now. This rewritten version captures the original story's emotional tension and social message while tightening the pacing and dialogue, improving readability, and keeping it within the desired word count.